Welcome to Green and Gold FC. I'm joined by my usual co-host, Alex. How are you going, Alex?
I'm good, thank you, Graham. I haven't been here for a few weeks. I've unfortunately been really ill the past 2 or 3 weeks, but yeah, excited to be back. We've had plenty of good football action since I've been away, so glad that it's this episode we're coming back to, more of a recap of recent events.
So your illness and recovery, that has nothing to do with Perth Glory getting rid of Zrilic.
No, I'd say I've been sick of Perth Glory for about a year and a half. Actually, that's an understatement. About 5 years now. But no, this was just your more standard sort of chest infection. I had conjunctivitis for a week as well. So all sort of piling on top of each other at a convenient time, given that we're at the start of another horrific Perth Glory season.
So let's start with the Socceroos. Selection has come through. So a lot of people have been campaigning for Callum Elder to be in there, and Jackson Irvine returns. So does Riley McGree. But of course, there were some few odd decisions in there as well. What did you make of it?
Look, I we've done so many of these Socceroos squad reactions where we talk about how Popper needs to be doing this and that, and then he gets results anyway, and I end up getting called an idiot online. But I will say, if we're going to be handing out national team spots just because people are scoring hat-tricks against James Delianov, then we're going to have some very interesting Socceroos call-ups by the end of the season. I promise you that much. But no, overall, I don't really mind the whole composition of the squad. I think it's quite good. There's a few players in there, obviously, that I wasn't expecting to exactly be in there. A recall for Ocon Jr. as well as nice. James Overy, really interested in sort of how that call-up has come about. If anything, if we were looking at more of like a wing-back to call up, I would have assumed we would have looked towards maybe Daniel Benny. But regardless of that, Overy, he's a fantastic player, and if we can nationalise him, beat out that competition from Scotland and England, then that's going to be absolutely fantastic. In terms of Al Hassan Toure, we've heard every opinion under the sun about why it's a good idea and why it's not a great idea. I'm more in the boat that it's probably a bit too soon, given that we've only really seen one or two good games from him this season. Look, in all honesty, I don't think Al Hassan Toure has really been that great for the last 3 or 4 years. He's been quite underwhelming. I'm glad that he is starting to hit his stride at Sydney, but I would have preferred if we maybe went for someone who is maybe on a bit better form. Max Caputo would be a perfect example of someone who's probably more deserving of a national team call-up. But I'd assume that Popper picked Al Hassan for his versatility, and nice that we get to see the Toure brothers in a national team camp together.
So Popper did explain his selection of El Hassan Toure, said it had to do with his speed and that he's looking for someone with that profile. He's a really powerful runner. Is there any other player that fits that profile that you think could have been looked at instead?
Look, there's lots of players that we have in this country that fit that sort of profile of a pacey sort of attacking player. Even Daniel Arzani is someone who probably could have used this call up very well. Iran Kunda, obviously. Iran Kunda is always going to be that kind of main go-to guy when we think of sort of pacey attackers. You look at the likes of Valupale, who's unfortunately injured right now as well. It does suck that he's out injured, but you know, he'll probably, if that's a profile Popper wants in the squad, I'd imagine Nish would be one of his go-to guys. Boyle, obviously, bags of pace. We'll always have those bags of pace. If there's anything that I didn't think we really needed, it was probably pacey players. I think we saw that this side lacks a bit of sort of technical quality. And while I do like us going up against stronger opponents in World Cup qualifying, I did think that from the games against the US and Canada, I really do think we lack that sort of technical ability that we are going to need to sort of rely on going into a World Cup year. Because it's all well and good having those sort of pacey players to hit on counters, sure, but it's not really a sort of sustainable long-term thing to rely on just pace and pace, especially when we play with a double pivot and no real sort of attacking midfielder. There's not really that many creative outlets. So I would have hoped for, I guess, more sort of inspired choices when it came to actually picking who we want our wide players to be, not just going for, I wonder who's a quick guy. But look, I can't really criticize Arnold. I can't really criticize Popper on anything too much until he starts losing games, which he hasn't really done yet, so I can't really criticize him on it.
So I don't know how to word this question in a way that doesn't insult the player, but D'Agostino, what is his profile? Because when I saw him uh, play for Australia, he didn't seem quick enough to get in behind. He didn't seem strong enough to hold the ball up. He didn't seem technical enough to be a creative striker. What do you think Popper's looking for in this player? He's obviously selected him twice. He likes what he sees, and he's probably got something about his profile in mind because he doesn't seem to be in the best form out of all of our strikers.
This is my main problem with the Popper call-ups. Look, I can talk about our House Santore and why I think he doesn't deserve a call-up over certain players, but the insistence on calling up D'Agostino to 2 national team camps in a row is an absolute joke. Look, I love Nicholas D'Agostino. I'm a Glory fan. I loved his stint at the Glory. I've watched a bit of him at Viking, and he's been on good form, and he's been out of form, and he's been this and that. Right now, he's relatively out of form. He doesn't get the most minutes out of anyone in the squad. He's come off of a few injuries here and there. I didn't really know why we called him up in the last window, apart from the fact that maybe Popper just wanted to sort of try something new. But to call him up for a second window in a row really speaks to me that this might be something Popper is considering going into the World Cup. And if it is, I'm not really happy with it. Look, I understand wanting to get younger strikers in, or maybe even strikers in their mid-20s, but just D'Agostino's not that guy that you should be looking to call upon. Like I said, you've got Max Caputo, you've got Zach Sapsford, who's back from injury now, you've got Noah Botic, who's on decent form in Austria. Mo Torre is going to be a standout striker for this country for the next 10 years. But even if you look at D'Agostino's sort of set profile, I'd say he's more of an all-round player in terms of there's no particular nailed-on strength to his game. When you look at someone like Mitch Duke, you think of his height, his strength, and his hold-up play. When you look at someone like Mohamed Torre, you think of his pace and power. When you look at someone like Zach Sapsford, you think of his good finishing from a wide array of areas, and also his ability to get in behind opposition lines. When you look at Max Caputo, he's a really good in the box finisher. D'Agostino is someone who is more well-rounded but doesn't necessarily excel at anything, and that's a problem, because if you are going to be that sort of guy that is nailing in on what you want your squad to have in terms of variance, you can't really be affording to give spots to these sort of all-round guys, and that's something I'm a bit concerned with. If you do want to pick someone who's more of that all-round guy, why are you not going for someone like Adam Taggart? I'm not just saying that because I'm a Glory fan, but you have a guy here who's been consistently one of the best strikers in the A-League in the last 2 years. You haven't called him up, and you've called up D'Agostino when he's on considerably not great form. I know Taggart's not having exactly a great start to the year, but he's playing in a dogshit Perth Glory side compared to D'Agostino, who's playing in probably the best side in Norway and still can't get minutes and still can't get consistent goals. And, I don't really understand it is the only problem here. If there was a reason that I could point to and say that's why, or such as, oh, he's on great form. Oh, all of the other strikers are injured. Oh, he's clearly offering this. Oh, Popper is clearly, dictating what he wants D'Agostino to do. We haven't gotten any of those things. So all I can do is look at what I see. And what I see is the fact that for 2 windows in a row in the lead up to a World Cup campaign, we've called up an underperforming striker in his mid-20s who is not getting game time at his club in Europe.
The only time I can say that I've seen D'Agostino look very effective is when a team is dominating possession. So the only way I can rationalize in my mind is if we're playing a weaker opponent, and we're not playing weak opponents this window. We might get a weak opponent at the World Cup with the expansion to 48, and we might get them in the Asian Cup. But that's the only thing I can come up with, that he's one if you are dominating territory and possession. But then how to use him in this window, I don't know. So what about James Overy? I get the feeling that the revolving door at right back and at striker seems to indicate that maybe these are 2 positions where Popovic isn't yet happy with his options. Do you think that's the case, or do you think this is a case where they've seen something at training with Overy which is just mind-blowing, and he's already there on talent?
I'd say it's the opposite of him not being happy with his options. I get the sense that Popper is sort of maybe not content with his options, but maybe struggling to sort of make his mind up as to what he wants. Do I think James Overy is going to get called up to the World Cup squad? No. I don't think he's going to be part of the World Cup squad for this year. Maybe the Asian Cup next time around. I think he will be involved. But like I said, I do think that the main right-back options are going to be Miller and either one of Karasic or Italiano. Personally, I'd go for Italiano just because of his versatility on either side. obviously you want to bring on someone like Aziz Bejic. So look, maybe you could look at Italiano as a good outlet on either side if you need him to be. But like I said earlier, I was really expecting if we were going to call up anyone sort of out of the blue, it'd be someone like a Keely Adamson or someone like a Daniel Benny. I really was not expecting the Overy call up. And to be honest, I've got to give Popper credit here because he has done this on a few occasions in which he's called in these sort of young guys that were performing well for the young Socceroos, especially at the Under-20s Asian Cup recently. And he's sort of giving them that experience around the national team camp, which I really, really do like. I hope to see more of this going forward in the future. If there's any sort of players that come to mind, I would look at the likes of Lucas Harrington. I would look at the likes of Alex Badalado. I'd look at the likes of Jalen Pearman as sort of three players that I'd really want to see get involved in a national team camp at some point. But apart from that, you look at the guys that have been in the national team camp, Sebastiano Esposito. You look at just now James Overy. You look at Paul Ocon Jr. These are guys that are very clearly going to be a part of the national team's plans for years to come. These are guys that have shown their intent to actually represent Australia over much more appealing European nations. And I think that's the sort of key thing with Popper with these youngsters is that this is a sort of a loyalty test, I guess, as to give me your commitment now, give me your time now, and I will make sure that you are in my mind going forward. I don't think any of these guys are going to appear at the World Cup. I don't think Ocon Jr. or Esposito or Overy will even make the squad, but it shows me that Popper is at least thinking of plans after the World Cup, which does in my mind make me think that he is going to be the coach after the campaign. Whether or not I like that, I'm not 100% too sure right now, but look, we'll have to see what happens with it. Personally, I don't mind it at the moment. I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of picking our best 25 to go to the World Cup. But yeah, like I said, I don't expect these guys to be involved. I don't think the choices at right back are necessarily done yet, but I think it is probably down to those three options of Miller, Karasic, and Italiano.
I guess if this wasn't a calling up just because they're mind blown by what they're seeing in training, one surprising omission would be Silvera, who has, yes, they played it once and he struggled to link up with Rustic, but every fullback struggles to link up with Rustic, in my opinion. He got 70 minutes on the weekend and he is still performing at fullback. He's not playing up forward. I watched the game live. Sometimes he plays actually in the back three, so they've converted him to a defender and he seems he's right-footed, but he plays a lot on the left side as well. That was one omission which did surprise me.
Yeah, it surprises me as well. Sammy is he's a good sort of versatility player. He doesn't really strike me as someone who's going to be getting that starting role coming towards the World Cup, only for the simple reason that I really think, look, let's be honest here. No one should be displacing Geordie Boss at left wing back. It should never happen. It never will happen going into the World Cup, I hope. But look, with Geordie's sort of risky injury history, I do think you need to sort of plan on what your actual backup plan is coming to an actual left back. And that's why I would look to bring either one of Silvera or Italiano to the World Cup. I don't think both will go. I think it'll be one or the other. Just because I'd like to have two sort of set left backs on either side, two right backs on either side, and then that guy that can play either side just to cover. That guy for me would be one of Italiano or Silvera. And it depends on what you want more of, to be honest. If you want a better defensive option, I'd probably look to bring Italiano, even though Silvera has improved leaps and bounds in terms of his defensive ability and work rate. I still think there's a lot more to be done. Italiano's played fullback for longer. He's played at a good level in Austria, so I think he's more accustomed to that role. If you're looking for someone who can come off the bench and provide that real, like, sort of spark, then I would look more towards Silvera. I just don't think that's going to be the option that Popper ends up going with, just because I feel like Geordie Boss is going to be that main man to provide that outlet off of the left-hand side. I don't really think it's necessary to have a left fullback that can come on and do necessarily the same thing except cutting inside instead of taking line. It's an odd one to sort of pick. Like I said, I am a bit confused as to why he was omitted from this squad so close to the World Cup, but look, it is what it is. I can't judge Popper on these decisions because I don't know if there's something that's happened behind the scenes. But if this is a choice made purely just on form, I would also have to look at some of the players that aren't on form that he's selected and question, well, why are these guys in the squad and Silvera's not? It's strange because it's a big few months coming up for Sammy in the lead up to the World Cup. So we'll have to see what happens here.
Middlesbrough are, of course, number one on the ladder in the championship. So that's pretty impressive to be getting minutes for them. So let's talk Asian Champions League. Macarthur and City have contrasting strategies here. Macarthur's playing Dad's Army. Melbourne City playing a bunch of kids whose voice hasn't broken yet. Kit Leshy, I believe, is maybe 15, I think, born 2009, playing at left back at the moment. And I don't know about you. So obviously, MacArthur's the most painful game I've ever seen in Asia. They looked extremely lucky to win that match, and it really, if the opposition was even a tiny bit more clinical, they lost. Melbourne City, they did seem to hold their own. It wasn't completely crazy that they got the result. I mean, they were lucky a little bit, but not outrageously. Did he catch the matches?
Um, Look, I don't think it's that mad to sort of say that Macarthur and Melbourne maybe got a bit lucky with these games. I think the performances were definitely under par, especially from Macarthur. Look, I know we can't really judge these teams that we're playing based on um, the country that they're from. You look at a team like Hanoi, you'll say, oh, well, they're from Vietnam. We should be beating a team from Vietnam. Not necessarily. It is a lot harder when you do play these sort of Asian Champions League games. There's a lot more on the line. It's a very sort of physical game. But look, I'm just happy that we're getting wins here. This is something that we've seen recently in recent years with Australian sides. It's that we do come up against these sort of teams from these lesser leagues and lesser nations, and we struggle but can't get the job done, or we play well but can't get the job done. We've seen some relatively poor performances from Melbourne City and Macarthur, and they're both topping their group. Melbourne's not topping their group. Macarthur is topping their group, and Melbourne sitting mid-group, which is relatively good at this stage. Melbourne beating out Japanese opposition in Machida is absolutely huge. I did not expect it. I did not think they would get it done, and just what a win for the coefficient that is. Honestly, that is absolutely massive. Macarthur, I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. They do need to be a bit more consistent. You made a great point about them having a really old squad compared to Melbourne City's really young squad. But yeah, I think honestly, I would say that Macarthur's visa signings have probably been a little bit underperforming in certain aspects. Look, you have G getting a goal on his A-League debut, nice moment, yada yada. But I think in a general sense, you look at the likes of Duran, Gerzan I think has been okay, but you look at the likes of Duran especially in their last A-League game. I know we're talking about Asian Champions League, but this is something that ties into everything in the larger context, because when you do have these visa players coming in, you need them to perform, especially in the league, because when you have these big games in the Asian Champions League, you need them on top form. And I know a lot of people sort of turn their noses up at Kanamori when City brought him in, thinking that this isn't exactly the type of big player that City needs to sort of replace all these high-profile outgoings they've had in recent years, like Valon Berisha or Jonathan Cohen. But Kanamori, I think, has actually been really solid. He's not been that sort of wow player that will come on and do all this, fancy stuff and get a 10 out of 10 every now and then. But he's a solid 7 to 8 out of 10 player. He'll come on, he'll do his job, he'll slip in the passes, he'll do what he needs to do, and then full time happens. But he's been someone who I think Melbourne City might need a little bit more from, especially as they get deeper into the Asian campaign. I think he's doing fine now, and I think that the youngsters around him are really, really stepping it up. Max Caputo, once again, we're going to mention how good he's been this season. But you look at the new imports into this Melbourne City side. Beckham Baker looks like a promising young talent. I've been watching him back since he was in the Perth Glory NPL a few years ago, so he's a gun. He's going to be a serious player. Benjamin Kutleshi, he is also a player I'm desperately keeping an eye on because he looks very exciting. He looks like he plays with wisdom beyond his years at fullback. For a 16-year-old kid to be playing at this kind of stage is absolutely outrageous, so credit to him. I think you've got to also give credit to Aurelio Vidmar. I think he's doing really well with this young squad. Obviously, it will be tough for an A-League coach at a club the size of Melbourne City to not have these sort of experienced names around the squad in a more larger aspect. But for the young guys that are stepping up and doing a great job on such a big stage, this is incredibly good for them. I think this is incredibly good for Australian football as well, showing that we do have a good enough young talent to actually be able to take onto the continental stage and get results. I'm hoping that this is going to continue. Melbourne City have some tough fixtures, but they also have some fixtures that they can definitely get results in. Let's just hope and pray that they keep this momentum up, because this could potentially be a huge year for the Australian coefficient.
I tell you what, that game, Melbourne City in Japan, it last second winner, so much jeopardy on the line because of the coefficient, where we are on the knife edge, where if we can start to get results, we can overtake China and get that extra spot soon. But we could also easily fall below Vietnam and Malaysia and end up losing a spot. This is the one time we get jeopardy. So I think like the finals are the only other time we get jeopardy in our domestic football scene, at least at the national level. And yeah, I mean, we don't have promotion relegation, so we get that little bit of feeling that you get from football usually. So it's just absolutely incredible. But I wonder if Melbourne City are proving this year if it's a bit too much overstated that you have to choose between results and youth development.
I think the sort of notion that you can't win anything with kids is sort of dying, especially in the modern game. And I know this is a bit of a reach, but you look at a team like Strasbourg in France and how they're able to get such consistent results at such a consistent level with such a young squad. I know obviously comparing Strasbourg to Melbourne City is, the furthest thing from reality. But when you think about it, realistically nowadays, what do you get from senior players that you don't get from younger players apart from experience? Because I feel, especially with football now, it's becoming a sport where young players now more than ever are needed on teams. You go back in the day and I feel like a lot of sort of teams would rely on experience and being able to get out of certain situations. But football is such a free-flowing, quick-paced game that you really do need those young guys involved. And better yet, if those young guys can play with maturity beyond their years, you're going to see incredible results. I think we're seeing that with Melbourne City, because you have Max Caputo playing like he's been in the A-League for the past 15 years. You have, young guns like Beckham Baker, who provides that real sort of youthful spark, but you have Kutleshi, who looks like he's the reincarnation of Aziz Behich, even though he's about 20 years younger. You have, really good options around the squad. Trewin being one of the senior players at, 23, 24 years of age is absolutely outrageous. Patrick Beach is, also putting up some really interesting performances, pulling off some really nice saves, including the one in the Melbourne Derby over the weekend. And he just got his first Socceroos call up as well, which is absolutely massive for him. So I do think that Melbourne City is sort of bending and breaking that mold a little. I do think that's something that we're also going to be exposed to a bit more next year in the A-League if the $3 million salary cap does get imposed. I know that the PFA are still trying to appeal that, but if it does get imposed, we're going to see a lot more of an emphasis from these sort of top teams on having to rely on their youth talents that they're bringing in. And what I'm liking from a lot of these top sides is that they're biting the bullet and actually investing in these kinds of young talents. You look at Sydney investing in the likes of Akol Ocon. You're looking at Ocon Jr. You're looking at Reece Yuley. Phenomenal young players. Abel Wallity as well. Phenomenal young players that are definitely going to make their mark in the A-League in the upcoming years. You look at Perth Glory, even the likes of Andriano Labib, Zach Lizalewski, William Franey, Sebastian Despotovsky. You look at the likes of Adelaide, bringing through incredible young talent as always. It's slowly turning into a league with journeymen, a couple of marquee names, and the rest is just filled out with talented kids. And honestly, I don't mind it at all. I think the A-League the last couple of years has been incredibly refreshing because of that reason. Look, do I miss the old days of the A-League where we would have teams stacked with players stacked with Aussie legends between the ages of 28 and 33, sprinkle in a couple of 24-year-olds and then a couple of failed overseas imports? Sure, it's nostalgic, but it's not sustainable for the long-term growth of the game. What is sustainable is this knowledge and this notion to invest in youth facilities, to invest in youth training programs, and to invest in giving minutes, professional minutes, to these young players. Because realistically, these are the guys that you're going to be looking to develop, sign on 2, 3, 4 year deals, and then sell on to Europe to make money to then reinvest into your facilities. That's how it's going to have to be for the coming years. I know we want to have this whole thing of, oh, the A-League needs to be competing on a continental level in Asia, but we need to slow down here and remember that at this stage currently, the A-League is a development league. The A-League is a feeder league to European leagues such as the Austrian Bundesliga, the EFL Championship, League One, League Two, the Scottish Premiership, etc., etc. We're not going to get to the level of Japan, Korea, and Saudi Arabia for a long time. Japan and Korea, because they invest heavily in youth facilities and they understand the importance of bringing through good young talent, and Saudi Arabia because they can throw money wherever they like and just hope that it sticks. We unfortunately don't have that kind of luxury, but what we do have are good young talents and clubs that are able and willing to take those steps to actually implement these strategies that are working in Japan, that are working in Korea. So I'm hoping that this is a model that the whole A-League is going to adopt as a whole. And look, really exciting times ahead. I think that this Melbourne City squad is perfect proof that you can win things with a young squad. And this is a model that is going to be sustainable going forward.
And the other factor of that is once we've been exporting players for a few years, you start to get some of those players back for cheap. Say they've had a bit of trouble at Europe, they aim for a club too high, and the overall standard of the league should go up to higher quality for less money, which is best of both worlds. So let's go on to the A-League. Looking at the ladder, do you see any surprises there? I think we all predicted Auckland and Sydney to be top two and Melbourne City to be thereabouts. I think, unfortunately for you guys, we did all predict that Perth would not have a happy season. But they've lost their coach, so maybe a new coach is coming in. Do you have a preference for who your coach would be?
Look, in terms of ladder predictions, I could look at probably every spot on this ladder and say that I've gotten every single one wrong so far, which I probably have. But in terms of performances, I'd have to say that the Mariners are looking like a really good sort of scrappy team that can get results when they need them to. Now, I will say they haven't had a performance so far that has relatively impressed me, to say the least. Even the 1-0 win over the Glory, I don't think they looked great. I think they rely a bit too much on sort of individual brilliance and pouncing on opposition mistakes to sort of get them out of things. They haven't really shown to me any sort of promising signs of attacking formation or just patterns of play or anything like that. But I think that we've got to give this team time. I fully expect Anastasiadis to come in and take the Mariners' job after the Australian Championship is done at this stage. And look, I think that he is a perfect sort of coach to give a project like the Mariners and see what you can do with it. In terms of other teams that I'd say are maybe overperforming a little, I would say the Jets to some degree, but they are prone to an awful performance here and there, like we just saw against Brisbane. Look, the Jets look like a really good, young, promising attacking side, but they are full of inexperience and they look almost a bit naive at times with the way they play. In terms of serial underperformers, it's got to be the Wanderers. They have been awful to start the season. I know a lot of people are going to point the fingers at Alan Stajic, but I would say look a bit deeper. These players are underperforming their metrics by a long shot. Even look at their most recent game this weekend and look at Bozhidar Krajev's 3 near open goal chances that he missed. 3 incredible chances that he should have been scoring and probably does score last season, and he misses all 3 in a single game. It's these sort of crucial moments that you have to be looking at and saying, okay, well, if these goals go in, then how does that change our result? How does that change our outlook on the next game, on going into the next game? How does this at the end of the season reflect our season as a whole? And while, yes, I feel like Alan Stajic as a coach is tactically stubborn and, maybe a bit abrasive here and there with players, he isn't the sole blame for these performances. I'd say Ufuk Talay even is probably more to blame for Sydney's poor performances at time than Stajic is to blame for the Wanderers. That's not to say that Stajic doesn't have any of the blame. Of course he does. He's the manager. You've got to be able to oversee these kinds of issues. But you have to look at the way that the players are performing and say, okay, they're being set up to play decent football, they're getting chances, but they're not making the most of them, and that's what's costing them games. In terms of teams, I think we all expected to do well. Auckland, fantastic. They lost a couple of key players, but I think Jesse Randall has stepped up this season. I think he's going to definitely be in conversations for player of the season if he can keep up this momentum. He's been really, really good. Sam Cosgrove looks to be a good pickup. Typical sort of just poacher in the box that you sort of need for a side like Auckland who do look to hit on the break. And in terms of other squads, I'd say the Raw and Wellington are sort of a bit here and there. They do look like they have potential, especially the Raw, just maybe look like they're not that solid in terms of structure at the moment. I do like their midfield. It is absolutely stacked with quality, but I would say that their front line just doesn't have that sort of killer instinct that they really need at the moment. And look, your strike options being Justin Vidic and Michael Roos starting a game is not exactly great. You do have Chris Long, but when that's your front two, it's not exactly a recipe for success. If I had to give one last big disappointment, it has to be the Victory. Melbourne Victory have not been playing good football. I know Arthur Dillis is a relatively new manager, but he's had enough time now to be able to coach some proper attacking patterns into this Victory side. And I watched them in preseason against the Glory twice, and while they didn't look fantastic, they looked better than whatever they're dishing up now. They played very poor against Melbourne City, and while they did have a few chances here and there, a lot of that was down to individual brilliance from Juan Mata, and he's not going to be enough to get them a final spot this season if they can't get the rest of it clicking.
So Perth Glory out of coach. Do you have a preference for who you would have replace Zulic?
If I'm not mistaken, I think Ange Postecoglou is available. No, but
That is true.
In all
That is true.
seriousness,
Graham Arnold could be too.
He is, yeah. Look, I am at the point where the last thing I want to do is speculate on who the next Glory coach is going to be, because, you know, for those that have listened to this podcast before and know of my work on Glory Days, they know that I, as well as my co-hosts on Glory Days, are very well versed in the happenings of Perth Glory Football Club. And I can tell you with confidence that we have been in conversation with the following coaches. We've been in conversation with Graham Arnold. We've been in conversation with Nick Montgomery, Ross Aloisi, John Aloisi, Patrick Kisnorbo, Anastasiadis. We've been in conversation with Robert Stanton. We've been in conversation with numerous coaches. Des Buckingham, I believe, was even a name that was thrown around. And pretty much everyone has said no, because we are not willing to offer enough money from what I hear, which is really disappointing, because that's something that you would say, okay, you've made a mistake by appointing a rookie coach. You have to go out and get an experienced name, and then expecting them to be able to want to come in to a club that is rotten to the core on a cheap. It's absolutely ridiculous thinking, and I really, really do hope that that's not true. I can't confirm any of these things because they're things that I hear from other people, that being journalists around the club that I speak to. But until I hear it from the mouth of Ross Pelligra, I'm not going to assume it's true. However, if it does turn out to be true that we're trying to get an experienced A-League coach on a cheap rather than doing our due diligence and actually wanting to go for the best option, it's very, very disappointing. If I had to give my sort of take on who I'd want to be the head coach, I would want it to be someone who is more abrasive and willing to sort of challenge the status quo of the club and challenge the whole current structure of the club. I want someone to come in and take control like Popovich did back when he was at the Glory. From top to bottom, someone who's going to rule with an iron fist. And if you had to give me a name I'd have to say Graham Arnold. He's done fantastic work with Sydney. And while I don't like his tactics for the Australian national team, he has shown he has incredible value and an incredible mind for being able to take a club or an organization or a team and mold it and bend it to his will. And I think that's exactly what the Glory needs right now, is someone with an experienced mind, with the know-how of the Australian game, to be able to come straight in and make changes happen immediately.
So I guess every Perth Glory fan is cheering against Iraq this next window. So I want to talk about my own club here, Brisbane Roar. I finally have something to smile about. We've got some young players in our 11, and it feels like we have brought back a lot of what was football in the 90s in Australia. We have blatant nepotism. Volcanis is playing at centre back as the coach's son. We've brought back the Biff. We've got a really physical team, studs up everywhere, studs flying. All of our teams look like they put on 10 kilos of muscle. I remember Vidic, he was not that buff when before he came to Brisbane, and all of our players look buff. It seems to be working. We are fourth on the ladder. Is this, as you say, we aren't scoring a zillion goals, but we look tough to break down. So enough self-flattery. Do I have rose-colored glasses on, or do you think we have a bit of a chance here?
No, I think you're completely right. This Brisbane team, if I have to give them anything to sort of point to that they didn't have last season, it's hunger, it's desire, it's that willingness to actually, die to win a 50-50, which is something that I feel was seriously lacked last season. And even your more experienced players like Jay O'Shea, I think last season sort of lacked that hunger, but they seem to have it back. And I think that the import of these visa signings has been absolutely perfect. I think every single one of them so far has hit their mark. Chris Long, maybe a little too early to call. I would like to see him get some more game time. But your midfield now being as stacked as it is phenomenal. I think you're controlling games really well. I think there needs to be a bit more consistency up top, but Justin Vidic and Michael Roos are still young. Vidic, I think, is on track to have a good season. Not necessarily the kind of season that I'd be expecting Max Caputo or Luka Jovanovic to have at this stage, but a decent season. I would like to see him maybe try and, well, maybe by the end of the season chip in with maybe close to 10 goals. Um, but look, like you said, this team looks like they've put on muscle. This team looks like they've developed an attitude. This team looks like they are the hardest bastards in the league. And that's the kind of confidence you have to play for when you're this kind of young and hungry team out of Brisbane. You have to sort of have that willingness to go up against any team and just throw shoulders and just clash head to head and just give it your all. And that's something that I think has been missing from a lot of clubs in the A-League, especially Perth Glory, since Alan Stadgett left. And that's something that I think we're starting to see from Brisbane. I do hope you guys make the finals genuinely. As much as I, don't really like Brisbane Roar as a club because of previous A-League Grand Finals happenings, and I will forever hate Besart Berisha for that same reason, I do really like this Brisbane Roar squad. They are a squad that I look at and say, you know what? As a neutral, I do like this team because they play in a way that makes me, even as a neutral, get excited. I enjoy watching this team go out to just be hard bastards and make it incredibly difficult to break them down. It's a good watch, and I think it's the perfect sort of profile to fit a new hungry team. I hope it continues until they can find out, a way to formulate some better attacking patterns. But until then, I'm seated for this. This is absolute cinema.
Yeah, we haven't had an identity since Ange Postecoglou left, and I hope we lean into this style and bring out the prison tats, go all in. So you did mention Western Sydney Wanderers. I do want to highlight them. Of course, this is a bit of a disappointing. I mean, you could pick a year where we're talking about, okay, the coach isn't doing well, but they've changed coaches every single year. They have the best supporter base in all of the A League, in my opinion. They're in football heartland. They have a good team on paper. They've gone through coach on coach. It doesn't seem to be any of those things. Yet they keep seeming to underperform. Is there a problem with the culture there? Or have they just had a really long 10-year streak of bad luck?
I think that I don't really know much about sort of the culture of Western Sydney as a team. Look, I know the culture of their fans, and that's something that I don't think I would ever like to touch on, to be honest, because quite honestly, the culture of their fans is not that great. But I will say, if I can look at one thing from this squad right now, it's just that the senior players are severely underperforming. I genuinely do think there's some good young bright sparks in this team that have a lot to give, but when you're having your main senior players, the likes of Bojdar Krajev, severely underperforming. Brandon Borello, severely underperforming. Lawrence Thomas, severely underperforming. When you have those kinds of players in and around the squad that are not hitting their marks, you do have to look at it and say, okay, well, how much of this is on the coach? How much of this is on the culture? And how much of this is on the senior players not doing their part? Because you can't put this on the likes of Angus Thurgate. You can't put it on the likes of Aiden Simmons because they've actually been decent performers so far this season. But you do look at the likes of Krajev, Borello, you look at the likes of Thomas, as previously mentioned, they're not playing to the levels we know that they can play at. And whether or not that's because of culture or coaching or just plain bad luck, it's not good enough for a club like the Wanderers. They need to be doing better. They need to be hitting their mark. They need to be pulling out these numbers that we know they're capable of. Um, I would say that they also had some poor off-season transfer business, and that could be a reason. Look, Angus Thurgate's a great signing. We all know that. However, outside of that, I don't think they've done necessarily that great in terms of their transfer business. Alu Kuol being their sort of big pick to lead the line this season is an awful option. I don't think that they've made a smart choice there at all, and it leaves a lot of gaps to fill. You can't fill someone like Zachary Sapsford with Alu Kuol. You can't fill Nicholas Milanovic with Aiden Hammond. It's just not. It's just never going to be enough for a team of the Wanderers' caliber. So I can't really comment on culture, and I can't comment on coaching because I don't think this is a tactical problem. I think this is a severe underperforming squad who need to get a grip of it. Otherwise, it's going to be way too late.
And it's not like Western Sydney championship squads are completely blowing things away either. Some of them are doing okay, but of course we famously have Sydney United doing poorly. So this is a football heartland. So it is an area of Australian football which we do need to get right. So let's move on to the Australian Championship. I want to highlight a couple close to home. I apologise for the bias at home, but both of our state's teams are in finals contention with one round to go.
Yeah, I am incredibly happy with it. I'll be honest. I was one of the first people that sort of looked at this Bayswater squad and said, I don't think that they're going to be getting out of this group, let alone getting a win, let alone getting 3. Oh my goodness. Look, this has been an incredible run for Bayswater, and they've had incredible support the entire way from the West Australian football community. And while people are going to look at their turnouts for the games and say, oh, well, they only got 800, oh, they only got 700, this means a lot to the WA football community in terms of the actual sort of occasion that this is. Now, I will say I'm a bit disappointed that people are being sort of made to pay $20 for tickets to get into these games, especially when this is a new competition that you want to sort of build the fan base up, build the hype up. You can't be expecting people to go to the gate to watch an NPL team which they don't support versus an NPL team from a league that they don't care about, and then pay $20 on top of that, having to, if they want to get food at the game, paying another $15 to $20. And it's not great, I'll be honest. I've been to 2 Bayswater games, both time having to pay $20 for tickets. While the experience is good and while the games are good, for a casual football fan, why exactly would you do that? Why would you not just go to a Perth Glory game or something like that? But look, aside from that, their performances have been incredible. And I will say this, for a squad that lacks, I guess, individual ability that Bayswater does, I would say they make up for it in terms of tactical prowess and their ability to play as a team. And anyone that has watched them in these opening games, especially the game against Sydney United, even though they were up a man, actually, I'd say the game against Apia Leichhardt was even better because their structure defensively is incredible. They are incredibly tough to break down. They defend really well. They challenge for 50-50s. They have good passing plays and they're able to break out of danger good. I'd say their only struggles are sort of from open play, working the ball forward, actually getting some nice passing plays going, but they are capable of it that we've seen on occasion. It's just they prefer to sit in that low block, and I think sometimes they struggle to play out because they're a bit too slow. But from set pieces, I've never seen an NPL squad this good at set pieces. It genuinely feels like I'm watching Arsenal right now every time I go to one of their games, because I swear every game, Bayswater are scoring off of a set piece. It's absolutely outrageous.
So they're not home yet. They have a really, really tough away game against the top team in the group, Apia. Only just the top team in the group, I should say. They did beat them in the home round, but they have to go against. And nipping on their heels with an equal goal difference is, of course, Metro Stars, who I do have a bit of a soft spot for. But, I want your team to get through. And they are facing Sydney United, who have not been they'd struggle against the NPL2 side at this stage. Sydney United, they have not done well. They've had issues with, of course, fan boycotts. They've issues with worrying about how much police presence is at games, which has probably caused a lot of problems with the club. But they need either Sydney United to do them a favour and get a draw or win, or they need to at least get a point against Apia. Do you think they got it in them?
Unfortunately, I would like to say that Bayswater will go through here. I don't think it will happen. It will happen. Look, I'm not saying that result against Leichhardt was a fluke because Bayswater absolutely outplayed Apia. They outcoached them. They outperformed them. They outplayed them in every regard. However, I'd say that Apia are coming into this with a point to prove. They will want to finish top of the group. They will want to secure that home. They will want to secure that sort of top of the group easy draw to go into the next round. And while I would hope that Sydney United would have something to prove, they have nothing to play for. They're already knocked out. Half of their squad, I've already heard, is on holiday in Bali, which is why they've been performing to such an awful degree. And honestly, I don't blame them, because the culture around the club right now is an absolute nightmare. And Metro Stars have absolutely everything to perform for here, and we've seen that they can get the job done when needed. So I do unfortunately think that Bayswater will be finishing third and not making it through to the next round. But whether or not they go through, they've done themselves and the the West Australian football community incredibly proud. And yeah, look, I might not be the biggest Bayswater fan, but you know what? They've got a new ride or die, a new ride or die with Bayswater because of their showings in the Australian Championship here.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see that group. Metro Stars have been slow starters. Also, there are slow starters in the Australia Cup too, but they are getting a roll on and they play beautiful football. But I don't want them to knock out Bayswater. Having said that, teams which are top of the group, you often see this at World Cups. If you're the top of the group and you're already qualified, and in Apia's case, they may not have anything to play for because Foundation 8 teams do get home ground advantage in the knockouts. So sometimes maybe the Apia may not have the same motivation to play. We'll have to see. Speaking of which, Avondale are well and truly qualified, whereas Preston, Northwestern Spirit, and Canberra, Croatia, all technical chances of making the next round. I want to see Preston win just because I want to see a South Melbourne Preston derby, but that is a bit of a nail biter, that group.
I would love to see it as well. I really hope we do get it. I've been impressed with Canberra. I thought they've looked really good. I'll be completely honest. I'm not particularly one that follows the ACT MPL too closely, but I'm very surprised to see how
I follow the
consistent Canberra have
politics.
been over the course of the Australian Championship, and I know that you followed the club very closely as well. But look, Preston, I think, are a club that I really want to see go through. Obviously, we've had people from Preston on the podcast before, so we love seeing clubs that are willing to give us their time succeeding, and I do hope that continues. But look, I do think Preston will go through. I'm happy to see Avondale through because they're a side that is really exciting in terms of being one of the newer sort of big MPL clubs. Having Bruno Fornaroli as well just makes them even more sort of sweet in my heart. But yeah, look, for me, all eyes are going to continue to be on Bayswater, and I hope they get through.
And we did have Stefan, author of Socceroos, come on our pod and settle once and for all the debate of about whether Northwestern Spirit are a successor club. They are indeed a successor club of the NBL, the NSL club. Okay, so moving on to Group B. Gosh, South Hobart broke my heart, I have to say. They have just not looked the same level as the other clubs. I mean, like the feel good nature, and also the fact that they've been here for 100 years. They were part of the soccer Anzacs, and that really made me feel a bit of attachment to them. And yeah, I don't know, it's just been. I hope that their crowds keep coming. I hope they still have pride in their club. It has been a bit. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the other groups. Heidelberg has not been as all conquering as they have been in the cup. That has been the one thing which has surprised me.
I think it's that sort of typical sort of postseason drunkenness and not actual drunkenness. I'm not accusing their players of getting on the beers prematurely. I'm saying that they've had a very long and grueling and painful season. You look at them losing the likes of Sabat Nura as well. Even though it's not down to just one man, these kinds of performances, I do think that you have to give them their credit and say that they've had an incredible season. I think it's absolutely fine for them to have a few slip ups at the postseason Australian Championship here and there. I'd like to see them make it through because I love Heidelberg, but at the same time, I can't really fault them too much for having a few slip ups here and there because they've had an incredible season.
And this, I mean, we can talk about predictions, but it almost feels pointless because in the end, we needed absolute walloping from Wollongong Wolves against Marconi to be a chance. So that one's pretty much set. But basically, the only possible surprise could be 1-2. But even then, Heidelberg's playing South Hobart, and with all respect to South Hobart, it looks pretty ugly. South Hobart's won the NPL finals though. That's one of the things which surprised me. If you look That tournament we used to have in the past, they have won actually 1 year. Perhaps just haven't been at the level this year. And so, final group, South Melbourne. Okay, they've just been completely dominant, 5 wins from 5. But my team is not there yet. Moreton have to host South Melbourne. I'm hoping South Melbourne have nothing to play for. We do need at least 1 point in order to hold off Sydney Olympic. Do you think we can do it?
I think Morton can do anything they put their minds to, considering that they knocked Perth Glory out of the Oz Cup last year, and I'm still bitter over that fact. But look, I would also like to see Morton go through, given that they're from given that they're one club representing a state. I think we do need sort of more of that representation of the NPL Queensland, NPL Western Australia, NPL South Australia, yada yada. But look, I think South Melbourne have been incredibly impressive. I did not expect them to be putting up these kinds of performances, and I really expected Sydney Olympic to be a squad that could challenge them for that top spot. Evidently not, because not only are South Melbourne proving to be incredible on the pitch, but they're showing that they have that sort of consistency to be able to put it up week after week after week, which they're going to need to have to do if they're going to be able to perform in the OFC Pro League. Now, given that, and pulling it back to the Australian Championship, I really do hope that Morton can get a result here. And while I think that there is a chance that they can get it done, I do think that South Melbourne are really going to have that sort of mental clarity to want to win this game, especially given that the OFC Pro League is going to come up soon, and they would want to win this group 6 from 6. And unfortunately, I do think that means that Morton are going to be seeing relatively the best of South Melbourne, in my opinion, at least. But if Morton can get a result, then all the better, because not only will I get to see South Melbourne slip up and it be an incredibly funny time on Twitter, but also, I'd like to see Morton get a Cinderella story result.
We do have the home ground advantage, so hopefully that's something. Brisbane's a very nice, friendly place, but maybe they can steal some of the Brisbane warmongle. But yeah, speaking of South Melbourne, they were pretty ordinary in the NPL, but they, like the other Foundation 8 clubs, have been absolutely, apart from Sydney United, have been dominant in this tournament. And the Foundation 8 clubs are, of course, chosen for their financial clout, which this does seem to be showing that there is a lot of slack there in terms of room for improvement. If you put pressure on these teams, give them something to fight for. So it has aged well choosing some of these, choosing the financially strongest clubs. But one thing I want to talk about is it's also been the Victorian clubs which have absolutely dominated. So Victorian clubs have played New South Wales club 10 times. They've won 6 of those matches and drawn 4. Absolute smashing. Is this a realistic reflection of the quality of the leagues, or is this just a flash of the pan?
I'd almost be comfortable in saying that Victorian NPL is ahead of the New South Wales NPL at this stage. I think that look, I think it's completely honest that no matter how well Morton or Bayswater or Metro Stars do in this tournament, I'm not going to take that as these states being up to the quality of Victoria and New South Wales, because that's just not the case. I do think that the Victorian NPL clubs are performing really well. I do think that they will continue to perform well, and I do think that they're on a better upward trajectory compared to the Sydney clubs. That may be me misreading it, but I do think that we are going to see a Melbourne side win this tournament here. Whether that is Avondale or South Melbourne, I'm not 100% sure. I think both teams are really strong. I think both teams have proven that they can get really good results and play really good football. But yeah, just a lot of the Sydney sides to me are just looking like they have that sort of degree of uncertainty, or maybe just not a willingness to actually give their all in these tournaments, which is a bit upsetting, because I really did expect a lot more from the New South Wales side. But look, at this current stage, you have to admire that the work that these Victorian sides are putting in. They're playing absolutely beautiful, and I would like to see this continue for the rest of the tournament. And look, if South Melbourne can go out and win the OFC Pro League, then even better for me.
So finally, let's move on to the Australian Under-17. They were about to commence Asian Cup qualifiers, and we're also having a couple of friendlies against USA and England, not yet announced. So we see Max Court from Apia. So we're seeing some production already from these from the Australian Championship. We saw a couple of names we've heard of: Alu Ocon, Henrique Oliveira. And also someone which wasn't on my mind, but apparently on people who know a lot about youth development. Apparently, this is a big coup. We've won a dual national in Jaraya Shah. Apologies for the pronunciation if I got that wrong. Are there any names here which stand out to you, which you want to tell us about? Any Perth Glory names that you know about, or any that you've seen in the A League?
I think it's very important that we do sort of look for these dual nationals in these other countries. But look, in terms of young products that we've seen in the A League, I will admit I haven't seen a lot of this squad, but there are a few good things that I'm hearing. I have seen a bit of Enrique Oliveira. I've seen a bit of Akol Ocon, Akol Akon. I can never pronounce his name correct. But look, there are plenty of promising players coming through in this country. I think we can all agree. It's about nurturing that talent and being able to actually get them senior minutes when they're ready. I do think that we do have a few young players in this country that are ready to take that step, and I think they will when they are actually ready. There are a few notable admissions from this squad, such as Kutleshi, such as Beckham Baker, but also I think that's more of an indication that they have senior clubs that are wanting them to actually stick around and get senior minutes, which, in my opinion, is incredibly important and probably outweighs the importance of under-17s Asian Cup qualifiers. Look, at least in my opinion. As much as I'd love to go to every tournament with a full-strength squad, I would much rather see 16-year-old Benjamin Kutleshi playing at right wing back for Melbourne City in an A-League game rather than seeing him bowling out against the under-17s from the Northern Mariana Islands, with all due respect to the Northern Mariana Islands. Look, I think that, like I said, it is incredibly important that our main priority for these youth teams is that we are looking overseas and we are looking at who is eligible in terms of these top talents to be able to bring in, because that is going to be vital to the next sort of 5-6 years of this national team, is beating out other European or South American nations to these dual national players. And look, I like that we're taking progressive steps. I like that we're already thinking of doing that. I like that we're sort of taking that next step to be able to actually do that. And I hope it continues. I'm sure that this squad that we have now will do absolutely fine in qualifiers, and hopefully we get to see them at the Asian Cup.
Yes, and the Asian Cup is you only have to make out the group stage in order to make the World Cup, and we have an experienced coach, Carl Vierd. So I am hoping for much more success and joy from here on. That's all we have time for. Please join us on the forum, greenandgoldfc.com. We're also on Twitter, Spotify, and of course YouTube. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, that's all we have time for. It's bye for now.